at this on the back end. And if
Mhm.
you're well seasoned with press and on screen, so you probably won't need this. But I always tell the guests that we edit on the back end. If there's anything you want to backtrack and just say, hold on, I want to say that differently, feel free.
Okay, makes
Um,
sense.
and earlier today, I was talking on Zoom, and it looked like my connection was fine, but but I was having a little issue with video. So we'll just keep going on video. But if it starts getting spotty, then we'll just switch to audio only.
That's fine.
Um, okay, and then I'll have read an intro, and then we'll kind of jump into our part. I'll just talk to you about what your childhood was like, what your influences were, and how that shaped you into who you are today, and talk to you about some of your multiple different endeavors that you're involved in. And and I always like to touch upon just being, the different aspects of being a woman in a male dominated field. And that's sort of the theme of the podcast. And, talking about fears and challenges and getting up when you've
Mhm.
been knocked down, and just trying to live to your full potential no matter what field one is in. And usually at the end, I try to ask for one major piece of advice for somebody who wants to follow in your path, or wants to thrive in a male dominated field, what your tips are and pearls, and also how people can keep up with you online.
Great, sounds good.
Okay. All right. Great. So let me pause for a second and get my bearings here, and then we'll just jump in.
How long have you been doing your podcast?
Since last year.
Have you enjoyed doing it, by the way?
I love it. I love it. And it's so funny because this is, obviously I have my day job, but this is one of the things, and not just a day job. I love orthopedics. I love what I do, but this has been just a passion project and something that has opened all sorts of other doors. And it's just been really fun and a privilege to talk to the women that I've talked to. So I love
Great.
it.
Good, good.
Absolutely love it. All right, I will pause. Today, I have with me here Dr. Saralyn Mark. Sarah, thank you so much for being on the 6% podcast with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the invitation.
And as I mentioned in the introduction, you wear a lot of hats. You're obviously a physician, but you are definitely one of the physicians that fit the bill of not being just a doctor. You are involved in leadership policy, particularly in women's health, and in fact, a 2011 AMWA, so an American Medical Women's Association Lifetime Achievement Award winner in women's health. Tell me about the point at which you knew you had a passion for women's health.
Well, it's a really good question, and it's funny when you mentioned 2011, I feel very old, especially when you get anything that's lifetime. That just sounds like something you get when you're about 95 years of age. So it's, strong ambition and wishful ambition as well. I think for women's health, I've always had a fascination of how men and women adapt to their environments. That's probably because I have a twin brother. So right from the start, I just saw the world differently, and I got to also see it through his eyes as well. And I knew there were differences. I think there was an epiphany moment when I was in training at UCSF, and I was near a beach, and I had my afternoon off. And I remember sitting on the beach and just thinking about some of the patients I had been treating and noticing how they were presenting very differently
Hmm.
with certain conditions such as heart disease and osteoporosis, autoimmune disorders. And no one had really talked to me about sex and gender-based medicine. It was really more that traditional women's health approach where we talked about reproductive health, and
Right.
occasionally you throw in breast tissue, and then that connoted, women's health. And it just dawned on me that we have something we need to really address. And I think that became sort of the cardinal calling card for me to really explore further. And I believe in synchronicity. It's what I write about in my book, Stellar Medicine, A Journey Through the Universe of Women's Health, that there really are no coincidences. And right around the time that I had that epiphany, there was movement in Washington, D.C. to
Mhm.
evolve women's health from that traditional paradigm. There was a
Mhm.
lot of movement and policy. There was NIH Revitalization Act in 93. There were new leaders coming into government. And there was also new leadership at UCSF. So we gathered together to talk about how we could combine different disciplines to really move women's health from just being siloed, for example, just in the OBGYN discipline, and really make it more multidisciplinary. And so that began the journey. And I have to say, I didn't come into it expecting that this was what I was going to be doing. I was just
Mhm.
following what was intellectually, spiritually, creatively, intuitively fascinating to me.
Mhm.
And it evolved into what I'm doing now.
So I know I went back to 2011, but I'd like to go even further back. I always like to ask my guests about just their childhood and their upbringing because I think it often just gives us a little bit of a peek behind the curtain of what kind of makes the person and tells us a lot about how you ended up where you are now and achieved all the things that you've done. And so I would love to know what that was like. What was it like growing up? Who were your influences? Who were your role models?
It's a really important question. Today, I gave a talk on gendered innovation in space medicine. And again, weaving both loves, both passions of mine. And I think when I look back, it is in my childhood. I was a product of the Apollo days, again, aging me. And it was so exciting because we were going to the moon. We landed on the moon. And I remember talking to my dad about it the night that we landed on the moon, saying, I want to do that too. Unfortunately, he never discouraged me. And he said that you can do it. And little did we know that it was going to take until the mid 70s before women were allowed into the space program. And then certainly
Right.
Sally Ride's flight. There's some artwork behind me, and it's by an artist by the name of Carolyn Kucera, who was actually commissioned by NASA to paint Sally Ride's flight.
Oh,
And I
wow.
had an opportunity to see her portfolio, and this is actually from the Hubble telescope. It's a painting from a photograph from the Hubble telescope. It's called Oceans. So for me, the love of space just came really early, and I wanted to be a doctor who practiced on the moon. To me, that just seemed like a natural fit. And little did I know that we weren't practicing medicine like that on the moon, and women certainly weren't practicing it. But I was led to believe I could do anything I wanted. And it led to my fascination in medicine, certainly, and certainly in space. I think we all wanted to be astronauts. I let it kind of go quiescent. While I was in medical school, I had enough to
Mhm.
do. But when I got to UCSF again, I remember having a patient who had hypercalcemia, and he was in the intensive care unit. And in my research and writing him up, I found, well, hypercalcemia is certainly an important condition with space exploration.
Mhm.
And it really then led me to explore further and further, and it reignited my love again for space medicine. So it was just a natural fit again. And then when I came to Washington, I realized I needed to pursue my passion, and I applied for the astronaut program, and I got to be a finalist. And then I got to get connected to NASA, and then I got to get connected to be their senior medical advisor for a variety of different health issues, from space medicine, public health preparedness, to certainly sex and gender-based medicine, workforce issues, a whole variety of issues that we needed to contend with. So my career is just really, I always tell people when they ask me, how'd you get from point A to B? I just say you follow your North Star. And if
Mhm.
you're true to what you
Mhm.
believe in and you persevere and you tell people, don't be shy about it, then you will find ways to get from point A to B to C.
I think that's that last piece is a really good advice because I do think that a lot of us, a lot of women have big dreams. And I think that sometimes we are led to believe, whether it's by society or the people surrounding us or family, that, or we could take the impression that, well, we can't quite do this, or maybe I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. And
Mhm.
and I think there ends up being a fear of putting it out there in the universe. And so that's
Yeah,
a big hurdle, right?
yeah, it's a really big one. That's the so-called imposter syndrome, that
Mhm.
you truly don't belong at the table. And
Right.
it's very, very difficult. I I often tell people, and again, I created a nonprofit called iGiant. So
Mhm.
in DC, you got to have an acronym for everything, and it stands for the
Mhm.
impact of gender and sex on innovation, novel technologies. It's an accelerator for gendered innovation across health, IT, transportation, retail sectors. And the vision is to improve the safety and quality of life for everyone in every environment. And that also
Mhm.
includes work performance. And the reason why I bring that up is that unless you're given the resources, opportunities, and tools to do your job well and safely, you're not going to succeed.
Right.
So it's really important that you go into an environment that honors that,
Mhm.
because you may be absolutely brilliant, extraordinary, but if that environment is not providing you the resources and the opportunities and tools for you to succeed, and sometimes you may have to educate them about what you need, but even if that doesn't happen, then your career is just going to rot in the vine, no matter what you
Right.
do. And
Right.
I think, unfortunately, I think we've all seen our colleagues, and we probably have experienced it ourselves, where we've been in environments that no matter how hard we're working and how good we are at what we're doing, it's not working. And
Mhm.
it's not because you're not good enough, it's just you're in an environment where they allowed your career to, quote unquote, rot on the vine.
Mhm. And, and I definitely see this not just in everyday life, how design elements can really
Mhm.
be exclusive of certain genders and, sex specific design. I see this in the OR. The
Right.
tools that we use,
Yes.
they are designed for like these, size 9 glove hands.
Right.
And I think that it feels very exclusionary. I'll share a little story with you.
Mhm.
When I first arrived at my hospital, uh, there was somebody on the orthopedic committee at a meeting who was complaining about, it was a male complaining about the size of our power tools, and that they were awkward and large. And instead of saying, I think this is too big for me, he says, look at these, that Nancy could never get her hands around this. And I'm new. I just came out of training, and it was just one of those, very kind of backhanded comments that I think women experience, but also speaking to the fact that these tools are are not woman friendly. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
surgeons out there that are women and very talented that definitely notice that. And even buying a couch, right? Yes, the couches are not made for women a lot of times.
It's really across the board, and that was one of the issues I brought up today, is we're becoming more housebound. We're noticing things in our
Mhm.
homes, from the chairs we sit at, the tables we use, trying to get to top shelves,
Yep.
devices, hammers, equipment to fix things. It's really designed for the hand size and the mobility of a man. So it's the anthropometry, the body proportion, as well as function. And I think what we're trying to do with iGiant is to accelerate the translation of research into these sex and gender specific design elements, the products, but also policies and
Mhm.
protocols and programs across all those sectors. It's interesting you brought up tools and equipment that you use in, in when you're doing surgery or when you're in any kind of clinical setting. And a lot of female physicians have complained that they've experienced repetitive stress disorders because they're using equipment that's really not designed for how their body moves,
Mhm.
whether it's laparoscopic surgery or
Mhm.
certainly for orthopedic surgery, where it's not just brute force. It's really allowing your body to interact. I call it the machine human interface, to really allow it to interact so you can get the best outcome and not injure yourself. So we're
Right.
trying to shine a lens on this, and hopefully we'll be able to move one the marketplace, and
Right.
also I think like what you're doing here, educating others that it's not because you're not good enough, you're just not given the tools to do it.
Right. And like you said, it's setting somebody up to fail.
Right.
Right. Right. So you are also, as you mentioned, a senior medical advisor to the Office on Women's Health within the Department of Health and Human Services for 11 years, and also to the to NASA, and president and CEO of Solomed Solutions. And so you're in those roles. Part of what you do is a lot of policy advising to a number of agencies, correct? Including White House, NASA, and beyond. Can you Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about this and some of the
Yeah.
challenges and triumphs you've had navigating this path.
Yeah, so you described about 2 decades of my life, which is really funny because one
And
of
now
the
I'm asking you
real
to summarize it for our podcast
and
episode.
it's it's needing to tell the audience you're not doing it all at once. I came from UCSF to Washington to be the medical advisor for Women's Health. I think I
Mhm.
mentioned to you we were trying to create these centers of excellence at UCSF, and
Right.
I had the opportunity to come and create them nationwide. So that was just an amazing opportunity. Couldn't turn it down, so I left California to come to Washington D.C. And then while there, applied for the space program and then got connected to NASA and began to be an advisor for them. And then around 2006, I realized I wanted to work more closely with the private sector, and it was harder to do it at the time when you're in a federal position. And I also wanted to write a book, so I left and I created a for-profit, a boutique consultancy called SoloMed Solutions, which provides scientific and strategic direction to the agencies and to
Mhm.
industry and to NGOs all over the globe. And one of my first clients was NASA. So I got to come back and do exactly what I was doing before, but with just a different badge color. And then I had the opportunity in 2014-15 to go to the White House to be the senior policy advisor for Office of Science and Technology Policy, and to become the medical director for Ogilvy for a period of time as well. And I was at NASA, and we were all focused on Ebola from different angles. And then I had, again, just the joy of creating this nonprofit based on my work at the White House. And it evolved into iGiant, became a nonprofit in 2017. So for the last few years, I've been really heavily trying to scale that up. As you know, when you're creating anything new, you got to put your heart and soul. And COVID has certainly added another dimension to my life. And I think for all of us, we're trained to have so many different skill sets, and we can
Mm.
apply them across a real panoramic view of the world. It doesn't have to be siloed into one thing. So as soon as the pandemic hit, and because I had worked in all these different environments, I really understood the juxtaposition of policy and how health decisions are shaped across political and psychosocial environments, which is also the backdrop for the book I wrote, Stellar
Mhm.
Medicine, as well. So I became American Medical Women's Association COVID lead, and have done quite a bit of media for them and some policy work, and stood up a task force. I'm from Colorado on it's a space tech task force on COVID-19 to help companies repurpose their technologies to meet the needs of this task force. And I'm just working with various departments of health across the country. So what I'm trying to say is we have ways we can combine our loves, and
Mhm.
working in the Medical Reserve Corps, which has really been fun to be engaged on this end of it when we helped to stand it up back after 9/11. So I think the bottom line is that every day there are new challenges, but there are also new opportunities.
What do you think, on that path was one of the greatest challenges that you had encountered, and how did you navigate that?
Um, I think, well, when I was creating the iGiant while I was at the White House, I was told it was too bold, that I should focus just on one particular sector, for example, the health sector. And I kept saying, well, health is certainly the nidus for everything, but I want to have greater outreach. Let's think bold. This is a bold idea. I'm
Mhm.
trying to innovate. I'm trying to allow the world to finally see that it's okay to see the world through a sex gender lens,
Mhm.
that we have to open our minds to environments that have been close to us. So that was one, and pushing it through. But, I had support. My first boss at the White House actually became the treasurer of my nonprofit, the founding treasurer. And he always said, just be the evangelist and they shall come. I think now what I'm seeing is there's ageism and sexism.
Mm.
I think for women, as you reach a certain level, migrating to that next step, you really need to have sponsorship. And I think men do that quite well. Women are learning to do it.
Mhm.
We need more women in senior positions to help do that, to reach out and bring forward. But also, it's not just women helping women. Men have to help women too. They are in the
Absolutely.
C-suites, and they are the
Yep.
chairs and the deans. And I think there is that element of, by the time we are ready to assume those senior positions, there's sort of that element of ageism, which I found a bit ironic. it's just a strange thing that we should reward experience. Instead, I think for some women, you get dinged when you're at that end of it. You get dinged during your reproductive years because they
Mhm.
think you need to take care of your family. So it's almost like, where's that perfect time?
Right.
And this is where we need to really, have that constructive dialogue and be honest and frank and open about it.
Do you think that ageism, I mean, I would say that both men and women are subject to ageism, but do you think that women are even more so because of that double hit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. If women had as much gray hair as George Clooney, they wouldn't get they wouldn't get jobs in Hollywood, for example.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um, I'm just watching Vice President-elect Harris and people commenting on her Vogue cover. Would you do that to President-elect Biden?
Right.
So yes, I think it's there, and I think we have to navigate it. I also think that Abigail Adams made some comment about one of our first ladies from many eons ago about make sure she told her husband, make sure you take care of the women. And then there was this issue about perhaps they're getting too close to the throne. So it's there, and it's subtle, and it's hidden, and it's this unconscious bias I think some people have as well.
Mhm.
So I think we have to navigate that. We really have to navigate that. And all of us, think about what we've done. We're living longer lives now. And you're coming into your 50s, 60s, and 70s. You're not expecting to retire and just sit on a beach or play golf. You're expecting to use your skill sets and be vital and be productive.
Mhm.
So we have to really open our minds to this perspective as well. We've done a lot trying to open that pipeline. Now we need to make sure that it stays patent at the other end of the spectrum.
You mentioned earlier imposter syndrome. Now, someone can look at all of the achievements and accomplishments that you have done and think, gosh, there is no way this woman has imposter syndrome ever. Have you ever experienced it?
I think there are times when I have been the only woman in a room.
Mhm.
And especially when I've gone into environments where people have known each other for a long time, or they've come from the military and they've migrated into a different environment. So they're actually using even a different lexicon.
Mhm.
And I've had to, really galvanize my forces with that. And there have been times when I've been in the room where people have started the meeting with, okay, gentlemen, let's begin. So making you invisible. So even though you
Right.
quote unquote have a seat at the table, that's all
Right.
you've got. You got a seat.
Yeah.
So, and I remember once being told that. And then the next time when I was on a call and someone said, well, I guess we'll all wear suits and ties, I spoke up and made the comment that I thought we were all going to wear dresses. I was on a call with all men and there was sort of stunned silence. And that didn't go over too well. But, I think sometimes you can use a bit of humor, but it's hard. It was risky. And I did pay the consequences for that.
Right.
But I did have to, again, as I mentioned earlier, follow my North Star. So maybe I will pay the consequences, but maybe somebody downstream will benefit from that.
And how do how would you tell a mentee, for example, somebody who is just getting started in the field, if they are experiencing a lot of that imposter syndrome, what are some of the coping mechanisms and what are some of the tools to kind of get that self-talk to stop?
Well, I think there are different ways to do it. What I have seen is that some women end up doing 5,000 different things to demonstrate that they're just phenomenal. And what ends up happening is you just burn out
Hmm.
or you don't really do anything very well, so that it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you're dancing faster and backwards in high heels, that whole Ginger Rogers thing. So
Hmm.
I think it's just to settle down and think for a moment. You are here because you have the skill set, people have believed in you. It's very important to have some kind of social network who, even if it's out of your domain of where you're working, just people who believe in you to help reinforce. And also, we sometimes make everything seem so important. So, what if you don't get that promotion? What if you
Hmm.
don't get that job? Well, the sun's going to come up the next day. Something else is going to happen, and you learn from it.
Right. I think we all sometimes have a tendency to catastrophize
Right.
some of these things that we want so bad. And,
Mm.
and I think that sometimes the universe has its way of telling us that we're closing this door so that you can have this other door open for you. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to roll with it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you talk to me about a time where either you've experienced a closed door or a failure and how you've gotten yourself back up from that?
Well, I think the world that I operate in now is very risky. I went from probably one of the most stable lifestyles, being a federal employee, to going in and creating a boutique consultancy, and then lo and behold, a nonprofit on top of it. So and also a nonprofit that is challenging. I think it's sometimes easier to have a nonprofit if you're focused on treating breast cancer, taking care of starving puppies, or something people can wrap their hands. I'm trying to create a movement, and just even the language itself is challenging for people. So every day it's reminding myself there is a need, you can do it. I think for all of us, we've all had trauma, and from that trauma, we grow. You're an orthopedic surgeon. We've all had bone fractures, and you know
Yeah.
how the strength of the bone, callus formation really strengthens the bone. So it's just trying to keep in the back of my mind, there might be something better at the other end of it. You just don't know what it
Mhm.
is yet, and be prepared. And it's not that you just sit back and do nothing. You continue to evolve, you continue to grow, you get yourself in the best mindset. And there are days you do it better, and there are days where you just want to sit with your box of chocolates and and watch Netflix. So it's just honoring who you are. But I do believe it. I mean, even right now, I live in Washington, D.C. I've got 20,000 troops with big guns about 5 miles from my house. Roads are closed. A lot of the shops and stores around me now are closed because of the pandemic. I'm
Yeah.
just on the email trail with I have a lot of older neighbors here, and they're just trying to find where they can get a vaccine. I just heard that we only have 8,000 vaccines and 86,000 senior citizens here.
Wow.
So there's some dark days, but yet there's something in me that's like, I need to see where this is going to end up, because some good stuff can come from it.
Right.
And I can't explain it, maybe because my dad was a Holocaust survivor. And, as a child, he lived through such horror, but he always had joy. And there's just something there that I think we're living under extraordinary circumstances, but out of it can come some really extraordinary outcomes.
Right, right. And for reference for the audience, because this is obviously going to be pre-recorded and released later, today is January 13th. So I'm sure everybody will look back and be like, oh, yes. So, and you bring up a good point. I think with the pandemic having been brought upon us over the last now 10 months
Yeah.
here in the U.S. I think that it has really made a lot of people appreciate some of the small things that may have just passed them by. And I think
Mhm.
mindset is so important in getting through this. And I actually just spoke to another guest on this podcast, and she said, "Gosh, it was very tough heading into the pandemic, but how would I normally have gotten the opportunity to sit down and have dinners with my 22 and my 24-year-old
Right.
children at this phase in their lives?" And so
Mhm.
I think there are a lot of little things to be really grateful for, and that's what's going to emotionally get us through as individuals.
Absolutely. We're noticing how the flowers are coming up. We notice nature sleeping and waking up. We're taking that time now. It's forced upon us to do that. I think also I'm seeing amazing innovation and technology.
Hmm.
BARDA, again, you mentioned the day, they have a closing of their RFI on January 15th, but they're looking at redesigning masks. I've been talking about that for 5 years. It was one of the reasons why I wanted to create iGiant, because we saw our N95s, our face masks don't fit women's faces.
Yep.
And now 3/4 of those who are infected on the front lines are women, partially because those face masks and rest of the PPE are just not designed for their body. for
Yep.
our faces. So I'm happy
Absolutely.
about to see that. Unfortunately, it took that to get us there, but maybe we can see some change in the end
Yeah,
of that.
I've definitely experienced that where at the hospital where I operate, it's
Mhm.
I fit into a small duck bill and
Mhm.
they run out. And then when they're
Right.
out, I've got to operate. And it's like, oh, well, find the next best thing. I know I'm not fit tested for it, but I've
Mm.
got to take care of my patient. And so, and like you said, that's where our healthcare professionals are getting sick, women.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
you mentioned your North Star and using that as your guiding light to know which direction to head in. For somebody who hasn't quite figured out how to find that North Star, what's your advice?
Well, I was just saying that to a friend today, how important it is. I think I have been offered some pretty amazing jobs along the way, and some with some really nice salaries, and I've turned them down. And part of it is I look at, does it follow what I believe in? Are there core values that they're going to appreciate that I have? Do I appreciate their core values? Sometimes you don't know until you come into an organization because, everyone's on their best behavior in the beginning.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think you have to find what is your North Star. What is it that you value? And it may be times where you need to stay in something because you need to support your family, you need to support yourself. So you modify the direction of how you're going to get to the North Star. But as long as you're clear on what's important, you can get through anything and may find that, okay, this was just a stepping stone to the next
Mm.
path. This
Mhm.
and I've seen it in several ways where I've been in organizations where I've left because it just wasn't following what I believed in. But then I came back to it a few years later because there were new people and there was a new appreciation of what I was doing.
Mhm.
So the other thing is never burn your bridges.
Great
Really,
advice.
even if you want to tear down, never burn your bridges because we're not living in a static environment. People come and go, environments shift, culture changes. So I think
Mhm.
that's also very important as well.
And I love the North Star analogy for the reason because even if you take a detour, it's always there. It's always going to
It
be there.
is. It is. And you just need to look and find it, and again, that proverbial sky as well as what's in your heart. And I think we've all gone into environments where you just so wanted something, and then you get there and
Mhm.
it's not exactly filling your soul.
Mhm.
And you try to figure out how long you can last for whatever reasons. And
Right.
so that's important too. So it's getting in touch with who you are and what you're experiencing and feeling.
You have already given our audience so many amazing pearls to just thrive both personally and in their career. But if you had a number one piece of advice, what would that be?
I always love that one, the number one piece. I have a chapter in my book called Sex, Chocolate, Wine, and Shopping. And it's about how life's pleasures are good for you. And I think during this wild time, you need to be attuned to that. It's not just all work. You have to ensure that you're enjoying life's pleasures to whatever it may be. So maybe that glass of wine at night, or a few chocolate chips, or going in and having exercise. We may not be going to the mall, but you could go do something that you enjoy doing, and having contact, even though we're not technically supposed to be hugging people, communicating in whatever way so that you have that connection, and trying to find a few minutes every day, as much time as possible for you, whether it's to put a YouTube video on and do some exercise, or listen to music, or go for a walk. For example, I went for a walk tonight. I hadn't been out of my house in several days because of what had been going on and where I live. And there's just such joy to see the sunset and to feel the air on my face. So I think that's the one piece of advice. We are so driven to succeed, and we work so damn hard to do it, that we can't forget that other aspect of our lives.
I think that's definitely a really great, great piece of advice that we can all benefit from. So, if our audience wants to keep up with the many things that you're doing and the very, very important things that you're doing, can you please share where they can do that?
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I'm going to be launching a podcast too, hopefully in
Oh, wonderful.
February. It's going to be called Stellar Medicine with Dr. Mark. And I often tell people I see the world through the prism of space using a sex gender lens. And I hope this podcast will help people find a life of balance by understanding how, as I mentioned, health decisions are created against that backdrop of politics and the psychosocial environment so we achieve a life of balance and wellness even during crazy times. So that will be coming. So just keep your eyes and ears open for that. I think you can also reach me through my nonprofit, smark at igiant.org. I'm certainly on LinkedIn as well and Twitter at Stellar Medicine. So there are many ways to find me. We're not invisible, and none of us are actually these days. And I look forward to hearing from your audience. And I always say to people, I wish you stellar health.
I love that. Thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I really, really enjoyed our talk, and I really enjoyed just getting to know you and knowing more about your path. And I know our audience will love it too.
Great. Thank you so much for including me. It's been a joy to be with you tonight.
Thank you. All righty. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on the